Chapter 1, The Funeral Vow. The rain didn't fall that day, it attacked. Thick, violent sheets pounded the earth like a curse from the heavens. Isla Romano stood unmoving at the edge of the freshly dug grave, her heels sinking slowly into the mud. Her black veil was soaked, clinging to her pale face and the dark curls that tumbled loosely down her back. Her fingers, encased in wet gloves, clenched into fists as she stared at the coffin being lowered into the ground. Luca was gone. Her brother. Her only real family. Her protector. 28 years old and buried beneath the soil. The priest's voice was low, monotonous, and meaningless. Isla heard none of it. Her mind was too loud. Too full of that last voicemail Luca left her, teasing her about the new guy he was working for, promising he'd be home for her birthday. That voicemail now played on loop in her mind, mocking her. Because her birthday came, but Luca never did. People murmured around her. Soft sobs, the shuffling of coats, umbrellas snapping shut. The press was outside the gates, desperate for a glimpse of the tragic sister of the man they claimed was gunned down in a Mafia crossfire. But Isla wasn't tragic. She was furious. And she knew exactly who was responsible. Cassian D'Angelo. The name tasted like poison on her tongue. A man born of blood, raised in violence, and now wearing power like a crown. The king of New York's underworld. Untouchable. Ice cold. Unapologetically lethal. Everyone knew Luca had gotten involved in something dangerous. But no one expected he'd end up dead in an alley, riddled with bullets, no witnesses, and no investigation. It was an open secret. Cassian had him killed. And now he walked free. Isla stood still long after everyone had left. Her father's hand had rested on her shoulder briefly, heavy and trembling, but she didn't move. Even after the coffin disappeared into the soil, even after the sky darkened and the storm raged, Isla remained. "I'll make him bleed," she whispered over the grave. "I swear to you, Luca. I will destroy him from the inside out." It wasn't grief that fueled her anymore. It was vengeance. And vengeance was patient. 3 days later, he came. She hadn't expected him to show up at the Romano estate. No one had. Least of all Isla. But there he was, standing at the front door in a black coat, surrounded by silence. No bodyguards. No driver. Just Cassian D'Angelo, looking like he had stepped out of a goddamn movie. Tall, sculpted jaw, obsidian eyes that revealed nothing, and a calm that chilled her skin. She opened the door herself. "You have a lot of nerve," she said, her voice like ice. "I came with a proposal," he replied without missing a beat. Her heart thudded. A proposal? A marriage proposal. The words made her laugh. Bitter and sharp. A bullet to the heart would have been more romantic. "I'm not here for romance." "Then what are you here for?" Cassian looked at her the way a lion looks at prey, calculated, amused, cold. "You're your brother's only legacy. The Romano name still carries weight in certain circles. Marrying you would stabilize certain alliances. Silence certain rumors. And settle old debts." "You mean you want to own me?" He tilted his head. "No. I want to protect you. And I want your cooperation." Isla took a step closer, her rage bubbling under her skin. "You murdered my brother." "No," he said simply. "But I didn't stop it either." The admission hit like a punch. She wanted to scream, hit him, claw at his perfect face. But instead, she said nothing. Because deep down, she already knew. Cassian pulled a black envelope from his coat and placed it in her hands. "What is this?" she snapped. "Your family's debt. Your father's name is on every page. Do you know how close he came to being the one in that grave instead of Luca?" She opened the envelope, her breath catching as she scanned the numbers, the signatures, the seal of the D'Angelo syndicate. "You're threatening us. I'm offering you a way out." "I didn't kill your brother, Isla." But I will destroy your father if you refuse. Why me? Because I need someone I can control. He turned and walked away, leaving the door open behind him. That night, Isla sat in the darkness of her room, the envelope spread across her bed. She could hear her mother crying quietly in the hall. Her father hadn't spoken in hours. This wasn't a choice. It was war. The wedding was a formality. No guests. No ceremony. Just a cold morning at City Hall with forged smiles and icy silence. She wore a simple black dress. No veil. No flowers. Cashin didn't say vows, he signed a paper and walked out. Just like that, Isla became a D'Angelo. The media didn't even know until 2 days later. The mansion she moved into was straight from a dream or a nightmare. Grand, dark, and suffocating. Every surface gleamed, every hallway echoed. There were no family photos. No warmth. Just steel, glass, and shadows. Her room was on the second floor, far from his. No locks on the doors. Just an unspoken rule between them: avoid each other. Pretend. But Isla wasn't pretending. Not really. She was planning. Planning to find proof. Planning to tear him down. Piece by piece. The first weeks passed like smoke. She hardly saw him. He left early, returned late. Sometimes she'd hear his voice from the office, firm, commanding, dangerous. Other nights she'd find half-empty glasses of whiskey by the piano, soft music still playing. Once, she found a gun in the drawer of the coffee table. Another time, a blood-stained handkerchief tucked under a book. Everything about this man was violence hidden behind elegance. But he never touched her. He never even looked at her like a husband should. Until the night of the gala. She was dressed in red. He'd sent the gown himself, and she hated how perfectly it fit. Hated the way the silk clung to her curves, how the color made her eyes sharper, her lips darker. She hated it because it made her look like she belonged to him. Cashin met her at the foot of the staircase. He wore a black tux, tailored to perfection, as if death itself had gone to a designer. "You look dangerous," he said, eyes lingering a second too long. "You look like a lie," she replied coldly. They didn't speak again until they reached the gala. The event was crowded, glittering with powerful men and women who bowed their heads when Cashin entered. His hand never left her lower back. Guiding. Protecting. Possessive. Isla hated it. She hated it more when one of his rivals, Marco Vitali, cornered her by the bar and whispered, "Does he scream like your brother did when he dies?" Before she could react, Cashin was there. One punch. That's all it took. Marco went down hard. Blood sprayed on the marble floor. The room fell silent. Isla's heart pounded as Cashin leaned over Marco's groaning body and muttered something only he could hear. Then he turned to her. "No one touches what's mine." She didn't speak during the drive home. He didn't explain himself. That night, she stood outside his study and watched him pour a drink. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Cashin looked at her with something unreadable in his eyes. "Because if anything ever happened to you, I'd set this world on fire." She left before she could ask him what that meant. A week later, Isla found the folder. She hadn't been snooping. Not exactly. She was in the study, looking for a ledger Cashin told her to check. But the folder was there, red leather, unmarked, hidden behind the whiskey decanter. Inside were photos. Documents. Security footage. Luca's last night. And a name. Marco Vitali. Not Cashin. Marco had ordered the hit. Luca was trying to break free from a side deal, something Marco didn't like. Cashin had tried to protect him, but by the time he reached Luca, it was too late. She confronted him that night. "Why didn't you tell me?" Cashin was quiet. His eyes tired. Because I knew you'd never believe me. You let me think you killed him. I needed you to hate me. It was safer. For who? For you. She didn't sleep that night. Not because she was angry, but because she didn't know if she wanted to kill him anymore. Isla stared at the ceiling of her room, fingers clutching the sheets as the weight of everything pressed down on her. Her husband, Cashin D'Angelo, wasn't the villain. He was something far more dangerous. He was human. And her heart was starting to betray her. He didn't speak much in public, but when they were alone, he became real. He told her about the first time he held a gun. About the moment he watched his uncle bleed out on their kitchen floor. About how he built his empire not through violence, but through fear. You can rule with love or terror, he said one night. But love dies quicker. Isla stared at him across the room. And what about you? Do you still believe in love? Cashin looked away. But his silence was louder than any answer. The storm broke a week later. Vitali's men breached the outer perimeter. Gunfire lit up the night. Isla was locked in the panic room by one of the guards, but she could hear everything. The bullets. The shouting. The screams. When it finally ended, the door opened. Cashin stood there, blood on his shirt, a cut on his brow, but alive. He looked at her like she was the only thing he saw in the world. And she ran to him. He held her so tight she could barely breathe. And for the first time, he whispered her name like a prayer. Isla. She pressed her face to his chest, trembling. I thought I lost you. You won't, he murmured into her hair. Not unless you walk away. She looked up at him. I don't want to. Their lips met. And this time, she didn't stop it. That night, in the privacy of his room, Isla kissed the devil she had once vowed to destroy. But he didn't feel like a devil. He felt like fire. Like protection. Like home. She let him undress her slowly, reverently, like she was made of glass and sin. His touch was heat and promise, his mouth was devotion. He worshipped her. And when he whispered her name against her skin, she knew she was lost. She had fallen for the man who broke her world. And somehow, he was putting it back together again. But peace never lasts in their world. Because the next morning, Cashin received a package. Inside was a photo. Of Isla. Taken just 2 nights ago. At the window. In her robe. A note was scrawled on the back in blood-red ink. You took something from me. Now I'll take her. V. Cashin didn't speak. He stared at the note for a long time. Then he turned to Isla, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. It's not over, he said, then we end it, she replied. And for the first time, they were no longer enemies. They were partners. Chapter 3, The Kiss of War. The day after the threat arrived, Cashin didn't speak for hours. He stood in his office, back to her, staring out at the estate grounds like he could already see the enemy approaching. The photo of Isla, left on his desk, remained untouched. She hadn't looked at it since that morning, but she could still feel the phantom chill of the stalker's lens on her skin. Someone had been that close. And she hadn't even felt it. You're not safe here anymore, he finally said. Isla leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over her chest. Then we make it safe. Cashin turned slowly.